Hi people, Wadlinger here. Let's talk about the endocrine system. This is the hormonal system in your body, and it's a very important part of homeostasis. At this point, you should have already learned homeostasis is about maintaining internal balance in your body. We need to maintain an exact internal environment so that all our enzymes and organs continue to function optimally. And so the endocrine system, along with the nervous system, are primarily what does that. So there's a lot of organs in your body that are just for the endocrine system, and these produce all different kinds of hormones and send them out through your blood supply. There's also other organs in your body, like for example the adrenal glands or the pancreas, that have other functions in your body as well. They don't just do hormones, they do other things also. So you can see here kind of a wide variety of glands in your body that are devoted to sending out hormones, part of the endocrine system. We're going to focus on just a few today. So the number one organ of homeostasis, some call this the king or the general, is the hypothalamus. Notice where it's located, deep in the middle of your brain. That should give you a clue. Evolution has really put this in a very, very protected location. And that's because you really can't afford to damage it. It's in control of a lot of things in your body. And it's in control of a lot of things that the endocrine system does, including metabolism, reproduction, growth and development, all kinds of really vital tasks. And so this is the one basically in charge. It sends out regulating hormones that trigger other hormones in the body. So this is kind of the top of the chain, so to speak. So when we look at hormones, generally we're looking at a hormone cascade, something that looks like this. Some kind of stimulus, and this can be being too hot, too cold, this can be going through puberty, this can be going through a menstrual cycle, this can be having a snack or not having a snack, but some kind of stimulus which will trigger the hypothalamus in your brain to release a releasing hormone. And this will get sent to the pituitary, which is actually attached to the hypothalamus. So this is kind of the one next down the line from the general. And the pituitary will release a stimulating hormone that will go directly to another gland in your body. And that gland will release an effector hormone. Effector hormones are so called because they do an effect. They actually cause something to occur. And they're going to go to target tissues. And the thing about hormones is they can have multiple target tissues all throughout the body because hormones go directly into your blood supply. And this means that there can be multiple effects from a single hormone release. So here's just a sampling of some things that the hypothalamus is in control of with its connection to the pituitary. So we're seeing reproductive functions here in the ovaries and testes. We're seeing growth hormone affecting bones and muscles. We're seeing stress hormones in the adrenal cortex. We're seeing metabolism-related functions in the thyroid. So all kinds of things here controlled by the hypothalamus with its sidekick, the pituitary. So these are the hormone control examples we're going to look at today. We've got metabolism, so that's how fast your body processes food into energy or stores it as fat, which is controlled by your thyroid. We've got stress response, very important obviously, controlled by your adrenal glands, which are on top of your kidneys. And we've got blood glucose, so you might have heard of insulin before. So we'll talk about that coming from the pancreas. So let's start talking about your thyroid. So the thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland that wraps kind of around your trachea right about here. It's right below your thyroid cartilage or your Adam's apple. You can't feel it, so there's not really much use poking around, but you can try. But this basically makes an effector hormone called T3 or T4, also known as thyroxine. And this goes to pretty much every cell in your body, and it stimulates metabolism. So lots of effects here, increasing protein synthesis, increasing bone growth, increasing maturation of your brain cells and nerve cells, increasing cell development from your stem cells, so cell specialization. And so how do we end up triggering this? So here's a little flow chart for you. The hypothalamus is in charge of this, so it's a traditional hormone cascade. We've got your hypothalamus being triggered by low metabolism. And this can be just low levels of T3 and T4. Everybody has their own set point for this from your genetics. And it's also affected by kind of your stage in life. As a teenager, your metabolism's pretty high. As you get to an older age, over 30, over 40, your metabolism tends to slow down. So the hypothalamus will be triggered by this stimulus of low T3, T4, or low metabolism, and it will release TRH, thyroid releasing hormone. It will send that to its sidekick, the pituitary, and the pituitary will then release thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, and that's going to go through your bloodstream to your thyroid, and it's going to tell your thyroid it needs to release T3, T4 now. And so it's going to release that throughout your body, causing all those metabolic effects. And you'll notice the red dotted line here, we also see negative feedback here, as we do with most hormones. So here, elevated levels of T3 actually inhibit both the hypothalamus and the pituitary, telling them to stop. We've got enough. And so if those ones stop, the thyroid will stop as well. And so here it is kind of laid out a little more simply for you. We've got our stimulus, that low metabolic rate, the hypothalamus then giving our releasing hormone, which tells the pituitary to release the stimulating hormone, which tells the gland, in which case the thyroid, to release the effector hormone, T3, T4, which is then going to have an effect on our target tissues. Okay, let's talk about stress. Hopefully none of you are too stressed out watching this lesson, but if you are, you can decide if it's short-term stress or long-term stress. Short-term stress, when, for example, a bear is chasing you, or you're running for a bus, or you almost fell off a cliff, is very different than long-term stress. Worrying about getting into university, worrying about a test coming up next week, things like that. And so the response in the body is also very different. They're both controlled, though, by the hypothalamus, who is pretty much always in charge. So let's look at short-term stress first. This is better known as your fight, flight, or freeze response. And so notice the hypothalamus is actually sending a nerve signal through the spinal cord directly to the adrenal gland, specifically to the adrenal medulla, the inside of the adrenal gland. So let's consider for a second, how come we're not using a releasing hormone and a stimulating hormone? Why are we having a direct nerve connection for short-term stress? What do you think? So as you might have guessed, this is because we need an immediate response. Hormonal responses are all well and good, but it requires hormones to circulate through your bloodstream, which can take seconds, minutes, and if a bear is chasing you, you may not have those minutes. So having a direct nerve connection stimulates the release of the stress hormones for short-term stress within milliseconds. It's much faster. And so these hormones, these effector hormones, are epinephrine and norepinephrine, also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline. And these have all kinds of effects on the body that you might be familiar with. But let's talk about them in a second. So just to reiterate, your adrenal glands, which kind of look like little hats on top of your kidneys, are actually two glands in one. The outer part of the adrenal gland, the cortex, is where long-term stress is controlled. And the inner part of the adrenal gland, the medulla, is where short-term stress or fight or flight response is controlled. So short-term stress. The brain has a direct nerve connection through the spinal cord to your adrenal gland. And that will cause a release of epinephrine and norepinephrine. And that's going to have effects all over your body. We're going to have extra blood glucose being released directly to your brain so you can make good decisions. Your eyes are going to widen so that you can take in more information. Your heart's going to beat harder. Your lungs are going to breathe faster. Your muscles are going to get a rush of blood. And digestion's going to stop because you have bigger problems. And so adrenaline, whether it is necessary or not, will cause all of these effects so that you can hopefully outrun that bear outsmart that bear, not get noticed by that bear. Long-term stress, on the other hand, is controlled by a hormone cascade. So hypothalamus in charge with its sidekick, the pituitary. Hypothalamus sending a releasing hormone to the pituitary. Pituitary sending a stimulating hormone to the adrenal gland. And the adrenal gland releasing our effector hormone, cortisol. Cortisol, like epinephrine, like most effector hormones, has effects all over the body. That's why it's a hormone and can go through the bloodstream to all of these effectors at once, right? If we're only doing one thing, the nervous system is kind of a better choice. So what does cortisol do? In small quantities, it's actually really good. It produces all kinds of positive effects. It improves your memory. It reduces your ability to feel pain. It gives you more energy. It keeps blood glucose high for higher brain activity. It even redirects your immune system to patrol the periphery of your body more. So all kinds of really good things. Most adults generally have a slightly higher cortisol level in the morning, and it kind of goes down throughout the day. Now here's the issue. Small quantities of cortisol are good. Being a little bit stressed sometimes is actually helpful. It keeps you sharp. But being stressed all the time is bad. And it's bad in a really physical way. Long term, having large levels of cortisol in your blood actually depresses your immune system. It causes inflammation everywhere, which is generally bad. It encourages overeating, fatigue, storing excess body fat, so it depresses your metabolism. It causes bone density loss. It impairs your cognition, so your brain function, and it increases your blood pressure. I'm sure telling you all this has made you much less stressed now. So overall, reducing cortisol in the long term is really important. For an academic connection here, once again, a little bit of stress is good. A lot of stress, you're not sharpening your memory, you're actually reducing it. Worse attention, memory, learning, word finding, poorer sleep. Nothing is good. Your brain is not made to sit in a soup of cortisol all the time. And so how can you reduce it? A really good way is actually just taking deep breaths. Meditation is surprisingly effective at literally lowering blood cortisol levels. Something worth trying. Okay, let's look at our last hormone loop that we're going to look at. This is a unique one. So controlling blood sugar. This happens entirely in the pancreas. The brain is not involved. The pancreas is controlling itself. And this involves antagonistic hormones. Consider if you can figure out what that means. Antagonist. You might have heard it in English class. So the two effector hormones we have here are insulin and glucagon. And antagonistic hormones means that they fight against each other. They're opposites of each other. So if we look at your pancreas, you might remember, is hugely involved in digestion. It secretes a whole ton of digestive enzymes, is responsible for helping neutralize stomach acid. It does a lot of things that are not endocrine functions. But in it, you can see little purple bits in the picture here. These are known as islets of Langerhans. Guess who discovered them? And these are the endocrine part of the pancreas. And different cells in those islets, those small islands, so to speak, release these two different hormones. So we've got two different kinds of cells. In this picture, you can see the red cells are alpha cells. They release glucagon, and this causes a raising of blood sugar. So this encourages cells to give up glucose into the bloodstream. Beta cells, which you can see in purple here, they secrete insulin, which you've probably heard of. This lowers blood sugar. It encourages cells to take up sugar from the bloodstream, so it's in the cells instead of the blood. Blood sugar regulation is really important because we need to continue to function even though we're not currently eating. And we also need to function after a big sugary meal so we don't pass out in a coma. Now, when it comes to any kind of hormone stuff with the endocrine system, it's really important to recognize that there's various problems you can have, and these problems apply to basically every single part of the endocrine system. You can either have overproduction of a hormone, you can have underproduction of a hormone, or the hormone level itself may be fine, but the receptors on the cells may not be receiving the message. And so various examples of this, if you have overproduction of a hormone, that can be something like growth hormone. So if you look at growth hormone, this is obviously what causes you to kind of grow and mature. It causes your bones to lengthen, things like that. If you have too much growth hormone when you're a child versus if you have too much growth hormone when you're an adult, you're going to end up with wildly different results. So let's take a look here. So you can see this is a picture of a person who had too high overproduction of growth hormone as a child. And you can see that their body looks quite proportional still, just very, very large. For the record, this is not a good thing. It causes a big strain on your heart to have to pump blood quite that high. Humans aren't really designed for that. Bones also have density issues when they're this big. But overall, these people, you can see, they just kind of grow very, very large. On the other hand, if you have growth hormone as an adult, that results in something called acromegaly, and you can see that facial features are actually distorted. And so a lot of people who have acromegaly actually went into the movie industry and kind of used that to their advantage. And so you might recognize the middle one there, that's Lurch from Addams Family. On the other hand, if you don't have enough growth hormone as a child, you end up with pituitary dwarfism. And so same thing, a lot of people with this end up going into movie industry to take advantage of it. They do face a lot of discrimination in their lives, which is not great. Depending on the cause of the pituitary dwarfism, sometimes this can be corrected during puberty by adding in growth hormone. So to jump back to endocrine-related issues for a minute, non-functional receptors we often see in type 2 diabetes. People with type 2 diabetes, their pancreas works just fine. So they're producing insulin, they're producing glucagon, but the target cells are not actually getting the message. And so their body is producing a normal amount of insulin, but it's not actually listening and responding to the signal. And so that is something that can develop through your life, especially if you frequently have spikes of insulin. And that is something that can technically be controlled a bit through environmental factors, although genetics, of course, does play a part. On the other hand, type 1 diabetes is where your body is not making insulin. That's a problem directly with your pancreas and the islets of Langerhans. So, hopefully you learned a lot about the endocrine system. There are, of course, many other parts of the endocrine system, but this is a good start.